The story kicks off with a guy named Clay, who once worked for an undercover group called the Beekeepers. This wasn't just any secret organization. It operated under the U.S. government and handled the kind of classified stuff that regular law enforcement couldn't touch. After leaving this shadowy life behind, Clay decides to settle down and live quietly as well, an actual beekeeper. He rents a garage from an elderly widow named Mrs. Parker, a retired schoolteacher who's now dedicated to helping underprivileged women and children through her charity work.
Those things scare me to death.
They've been killing my honeybees.
Mrs. Parker is happy to have Clay around because he's polite and respectful, while Clay feels grateful for her generosity in letting him rent the space.
I just wanted to thank you.
One evening, after a day's work, Mrs. Parker invites Clay for dinner. While they're chatting, she notices a warning pop up on her laptop. Some virus alert claiming her hard drive is at risk. The message includes a helpline number to fix the issue. Without thinking twice, Mrs. Parker dials the number, but it connects her to a shady operation run by a group of cybercriminals.
Boss, got something? Yeah? I got one.
Posing as a legitimate antivirus company, this gang specializes in phishing scams.
Records show that you actually have an older version on your account.
Once she's on the call, hackers take control of her computer remotely and start digging through her financial records.
Teacher's pension and holy.
Mrs. Parker, who doesn't know much about tech, explains her problem to the so-called manager, Garnett. He reassures her that what she's seeing is all part of their virus removal process.
Ooh, my computer's going crazy.
Playing the part of a helpful expert, Garnett even apologizes for the inconvenience and offers her a compensation payment.
Because of this inconvenience, I'm going to credit back your subscription fees.
Mrs. Parker, trusting his intentions, provides her bank details, and to her surprise, $50,000 is transferred to her account.
There's a transfer for $50,000?
But things take a dark turn. Garnett tells her there was a mistake, that only $500 was meant to be sent, and asks her to return the excess amount.
I got kids. I ain't got fucking kids.
Thinking she's doing the right thing, Mrs. Parker logs into her bank account to refund the money. The moment she enters her password, everything in her account vanishes. The hackers drain not just her savings, but also the funds she was managing for the charity. While Mrs. Parker is reeling from the loss, Clay is in his garage, bottling honey as a gift for her. When he arrives at her house, something feels off.
Is this Parker?
Sensing danger, he grabs a knife from the kitchen and cautiously steps into the living room. What he finds there is devastating. Mrs. Parker is lifeless, a pistol lying on the floor beside her.
Don't move. Don't you move.
Before Clay can process what's happened, an FBI agent named Verona bursts in, gun drawn, accusing him of being involved in Mrs. Parker's death.
So sorry.
Well, how do you know my...
To make matters worse, Mrs. Parker turns out to be Verona's mother. Overwhelmed by grief and anger, Verona calls the local police, who soon arrive, investigate the scene, and take Clay in for questioning.
Adam Clay?
I don't have much to say.
Despite mourning her mother's death, Verona is determined to get to the bottom of what happened. She dives into the investigation and uncovers evidence that Mrs. Parker was targeted by a notorious phishing scam, losing all her money and the charity funds.
Oh my God.
What's even more heartbreaking is that Mrs. Parker's death wasn't a murder. The police conclude that in her despair over the financial loss, Mrs. Parker tragically took her own life.
His hands tested negative for gunshot residue, but the prints on the gun were your mother's.
The next day, Clay is released from custody, and Verona shows up at his place to apologize for wrongly accusing him.
Mr. Clay, I need to apologize for...
She opens up about the scam that destroyed her mother's life, revealing details about the criminal syndicate posing as an antivirus company.
Somebody emptied out all her accounts.
This gang had been on the FBI's radar for years, but had managed to stay one step ahead of the law. Hearing all this, Clay's resolve hardens. He contacts the Beekeepers, calling in a favor to track down the criminals responsible.
What are you doing? Thought you retired.
I did. I need a favor.
With their resources, it doesn't take long for the Beekeepers to identify the fraudulent company, UDG, and its ringleader, Garnett.
They're routing all over the world.
But you found him.
Sure.
Armed with this intel, Clay prepares to take action. He heads straight to UDG's headquarters, bringing along 2 cans of gasoline. After taking out the security guards with ease, he storms into the control room, where the employees are hard at work. Clay singles one of them out, roughing him up and delivering a clear message.
Hang up the phone.
Stop preying on vulnerable people like Mrs. Parker. He orders everyone out of the room and starts dousing the place in gasoline. Right then, Garnett and his goons show up, but Clay takes them down effortlessly. He rigs an explosive device to a phone call trigger, warning Garnett that he better get out if he values his life. With that, Clay walks away, leaving behind a burning reminder of the consequences of exploiting the innocent. Moments after a phone call was made, a massive explosion ripped through the UDG building, leaving destruction in its wake. Shaken by the incident, Garnett immediately contacted his boss, Danforth, to report what had happened. He explained that a man calling himself the Beekeeper had stormed their headquarters, taken out the security team, and blown the place to bits.
This dude just strolls in.
And what?
And he burns the place to the ground.
Furious, Danforth wasted no time and ordered Garnett to round up some hired muscle to take Clay out for good.
Wrecking crew together and you go Goodfellas on. I mean, come on, you're a connected guy, right?
Meanwhile, news of the explosion reached Verona, who couldn't help but feel a sense of justice being served.
Can I just have this moment?
The next day, Garnett and his gang managed to locate Clay, who was busy tending to his beehives. As Clay wrapped up his work and left the farm, the thugs destroyed his beehives and quietly followed him.
They said your boy has an old-ass pickup truck.
It was clear, though, that Clay knew they were tailing him. He was already gearing up for a showdown. Back at his house, Garnett and his crew launched their attack, but Clay wasn't caught off guard. Using his combat skills, he fought back fiercely, taking out the thugs one by one. Garnett, however, was spared, though not without consequence. Clay made sure to leave Garnett with a painful reminder by cutting off his fingers. Barely managing to escape, Garnett fled the scene. At the same time, Verona was interrogating a UDG employee when she got alarming news about a fire at her mother's house. She rushed to the scene and discovered that Clay's garage had been burned to the ground. Among the charred remains, she found an ID card linked to UDG on one of the recovered bodies, raising her suspicions that Clay might somehow be connected to all the chaos involving the company. Meanwhile, Garnett, nursing his injuries, called Danforth to report the failed hit job and his missing fingers. Danforth's frustration boiled over.
I'm so sorry, Mr. Danforth.
And he started questioning who Clay really was. In the middle of their call, Clay himself showed up, launching a surprise attack on Garnett.
Hi, or something. Oh!
With no mercy, Clay bound Garnett to the front of his car with a belt and sent the vehicle hurtling into the water. Danforth, still on the phone, heard the entire ordeal unfold.
You want crypto? NFTs? You want...
Picking up Garnett's phone, Clay coldly informed Danforth that he was coming for him next.
I'm about to show you.
While all this was happening, Verona and her partner, Matt, were digging into Clay's background using government databases. They kept hitting dead ends, which only deepened Verona's suspicions. She began to piece together that Clay might have been part of some super-secret government program that even the FBI didn't know much about. Not long after, Verona got wind of Garnett's body being found tied to Clay's truck drowned. This news added another layer of mystery to the case. On the other hand, Danforth, sensing the growing threat, reached out to Wallace, a former CIA big shot who now handled security for his mother, Jessica, the newly sworn-in president of the United States. Jessica had specifically asked Wallace to keep her son safe, and now Wallace had to deal with the mess Danforth had gotten into with the Beekeeper. Wallace immediately contacted Janet, the current CIA director, to get intel on Clay. Janet revealed that Clay had retired from the Beekeepers, a highly classified unit. Without wasting time, Wallace ordered Janet to eliminate Clay. Janet passed the job to one of the Beekeepers' operatives, Anna, instructing her to take Clay out. Clay, meanwhile, was minding his own business at a gas station when Anna ambushed him. But Clay wasn't an easy target. He turned the tables, overpowering Anna and even cutting off her fingers before setting her on fire. The blaze engulfed the gas station, creating a massive explosion. Realizing the situation was spiraling out of control, the Beekeepers informed the CIA that they would no longer involve themselves in the conflict, opting to remain neutral. Janet passed this update to Wallace, making it clear that both the Beekeepers and the CIA were stepping back from the feud between Clay and Danforth. With no outside help, Wallace decided to take matters into his own hands. He assembled a team of elite Special Forces operatives, briefing them on Clay's background. He painted Clay as a rogue agent who posed a serious threat to innocent lives, convincing the team that he needed to be stopped at all costs. The next day, Verona and Matt arrived at the destroyed gas station, where they discovered Anna's unrecognizable body. It became clear that Anna had been part of a covert government group, but Verona couldn't figure out why she had been after Clay. Meanwhile, Clay wasn't wasting any time. Using Anna's severed finger, he accessed her residence and hacked into her computer. From there, he tracked the signal from Garnett's phone, pinpointing Danforth's location to the 9 Points building. Clay was now laser-focused on finishing what he started, and Danforth's time was running out. Armed with everything he needed, Clay grabbed weapons and explosives from Anna's stash and set off. At the same time, Wallace's Special Forces team, tasked with taking Clay out, had already reached the 9 Points building. Outside, the FBI SWAT team was stationed, fully aware that Clay would strike. However, Wallace's team didn't seem too concerned about the chaos brewing. They allowed the employees in the building to carry on as usual, making it seem like just another day. Much like UDG, the NSU company housed in the building wasn't clean. It was tied up in shady phishing scams and other criminal activities. Before long, Clay showed up, catching the SWAT team completely off guard while they were still planning their approach. Without wasting a second, Clay launched an attack, easily overpowering them. Once the SWAT team was out of the way, Clay slipped into the building and blended in with the NSU staff like he belonged there. Things didn't stay quiet for long, though. One of Wallace's Special Forces operatives eventually recognized Clay and attacked. The rest of the team quickly joined the fight, but Clay wasn't easy prey. Using his skills, he dodged their attacks and took them out one by one until none were left standing. With the immediate threat neutralized, Clay grabbed Rico, one of NSU's executives, and demanded answers. At first, Rico resisted, but Clay wasn't in the mood for games. He made it clear he'd stop at nothing to bring down whoever was behind the company's illegal activities. Realizing he had no way out, Rico finally spilled the beans and revealed the name of his boss. But before Clay could act on this new information, Verona and her team stormed in, guns drawn. Clay managed to escape just in time. Meanwhile, Verona and her partner Matt pieced together the bigger picture. They discovered that the owner of both NSU and UDG, the companies behind the phishing scams, was none other than Danforth, the son of the President of the United States. Both companies fell under Danforth Enterprises, a family business that also managed software for several U.S. government agencies. This revelation painted a clear target for Clay, and Verona suspected he might not stop at Danforth. He could be coming for the president herself, Jessica Danforth, who happened to be Danforth's mother. Deputy Director Pree, alarmed by the situation, reassigned Verona and Matt to focus on capturing Clay while the SWAT team beefed up security for the president and her family. The next day, Verona and Matt joined Secret Service agents at a high-profile charity event hosted by the president and her son at their beachfront mansion. Security was tight, with Secret Service, FBI personnel, and even Wallace's hired mercenaries. led by a man named Lazarus, who claimed he'd taken down a beekeeper in the past, though he lost a leg in the process. Clay, however, was always a step ahead. He managed to sneak into the Danforth estate through a drainage channel, hiding under a truck. After neutralizing a SWAT team member, he planted bombs on several vehicles and disguised himself to blend in with the event's guests. Meanwhile, Pre met with the president and laid everything out on the table. He exposed Danforth's dirty dealings, including how campaign funds had come from his scams. Furious and ashamed, Jessica realized the depth of her son's corruption. As all this unfolded, Verona sensed Clay's presence and ordered the SWAT team to move in. Surrounded and at gunpoint, Clay appeared to surrender, kneeling on the ground. But this was just a ruse. He detonated the bombs on the Secret Service vehicles, creating chaos and using the distraction to eliminate his immediate attackers. Inside the mansion, Clay fought his way through the building, taking out Secret Service agents and showing no mercy to Wallace's mercenaries. Eventually, he reached the hallway leading to the president's office, where he faced off with Lazarus in a brutal fight. Despite Lazarus's tough reputation, Clay came out on top and moved closer to his target. When Clay tried to enter the president's office, Wallace stepped in, attempting to reason with him. Wallace begged him not to harm Danforth, but Clay was beyond negotiations. Instead, he broke Wallace's fingers and pushed past him. Inside the office, the tension reached a boiling point. Jessica was ready to expose her son's crimes, hoping for some mercy from Clay. Danforth, cornered and desperate, grabbed a gun and fatally shot Pre in a panic. Undeterred, Clay planted an explosive device on the door. As it blew open, he stormed into the room, with Verona and other FBI agents close behind. Danforth, now completely unhinged, grabbed his mother and used her as a human shield. Verona tried to de-escalate the situation, urging Clay to stand down and not harm Jessica or Danforth. But Clay wasn't swayed. He turned to Verona and posed a chilling question. Was she there to uphold the law or deliver justice? In the intense standoff, it became clear Danforth was willing to harm his own mother to escape. Seeing this, Clay made his decision. He shot and killed Danforth, ending the threat for good. Before anyone could stop him, Clay escaped through a window. Verona had a clear shot at him as he fled, but she chose not to take it. She decided to prioritize justice for all the victims of Danforth's crimes rather than sticking strictly to the rules. In the end, Clay managed to make his getaway, slipping into the ocean with scuba gear he had stashed on the beach.